What would you say is now the number one cause of death in the African American community?
Heart disease.
Oh, HIV, AIDS.
Diabetes, cancer, AIDS.
I'll say heart disease.
AIDS.
From what I heard, it's probably AIDS, you know.
Probably heart disease.
I think heart disease.
HIV. Gang violence.
What if I told you the real answer was abortion?
Welcome to my podcast. The Uncertified Sociology Enthusiast is my title. This is space for the curious thinkers.
I want us to listen to this conversation keenly because it forms the basis for our discussion today. As you all know, we are all just curious people. Let's get into it.
The speakers are the President of the United States, Republican Richard Nixon, and members of his senior staff.
A majority of people in Colorado voted for abortion. I think a majority of people in Michigan have voted for abortion. I think in both cases, well, certainly in Michigan, they will vote for it because they think that what's going to be aborted generally are the little black bastards. As I told you, we talked about it earlier, that a hell of a lot of people want to control the Negro bastard. Yeah. Isn't that really true? So you know what we're talking about, population control. Sure. We're talking really, and what John Rockefeller realizes, the people in what we call our class control their populations. Sometimes they'll have a family of 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, but it's exceptional. The people who don't control their families are the people that shouldn't have kids. Now that's what the black population in the city of San Francisco has gone from 3,000 right after World War II to where they represent 30% of the population of San Francisco. Yes, sir.
Today, we want to explore an experiment done on Black Americans and connect it to events happening now. At the end of it all, you will understand how hookup culture, porn, social media are essentially all social engineering experiments. They are meant to rewire women to chase infinite validation while nuking birth rates and making modern dating feel hopeless. Welcome to this second episode of our series on population control.
What shall be done with the 4 million slaves if they are emancipated? This question has been answered and can be answered in many ways. Primarily, it is a question less for man than for God, less for human intellect than for the laws of nature to solve. Our answer is, do nothing with them. Mind your business and let them mind theirs. Your doing with them is their greatest misfortune. They have been undone by your doings, and all they now ask and really have need of at your hands is just to let them alone. Frederick Douglass, 1862.
It is the stupidity of man to think that he can do evil, even some monstrous evil, and it won't have any backlash on himself. But of course, it seldom works that way, and the moment he figures that out, he starts looking for a way to avoid the repercussions of what he's done. This is what happened with slavery. In the early 1800s, as it began to look like the end of slavery might be on the horizon, white America started to be concerned that a day of reckoning was coming. The primary fear for the average person was of retribution and insurrection, and that was a reasonable fear. After all, it's illogical to think that you can do to a whole group of people what was done to African Americans and think that they will just take it lying down forever. And of course, there were things like the Nat Turner uprisings. But for the wealthy elite, their fears went beyond things like insurrection. They were worried about the financial impact. Remember, it was not just the cotton plantations that profited from slavery. Whether you're talking about the banks or the insurance companies, the railroads, even the newspapers, the fact is that almost every aspect of the American economy was at some level or another invested in the slave business. You also need to recognize that for the wealthy elitist who controlled this system, slaves were an asset as long as they were slaves. But at the moment they are set free, they become a liability.
Sounds familiar, guys? Isn't this what is happening now? We are being emancipated by AI. Why do you think so many people are losing their jobs? As we continue watching, I'd like us to know that AI will replace so many people into the future, making the unemployed a liability for the elite. For example, let us look at this company that invests in autonomous labs. My degree as an industrial chemist may be cooked.
The company is called Telescope Innovations. Here is their ticker symbol on your screen, TELIF. It's a very special company. So Telescope Innovations is available with Schwab, Interactive Brokers, Fidelity, E-Trade, all of the big brokerages out there. Now, on December 9th, 2025, it changed everything for this company. This is the dry data here, just about Telescope Innovations, just so you know that some of the dry data here, okay? 2-time Nobel Prize winner in chemistry is involved in this, check. Multiple previous exits in this very industry, check. Generating revenues already, check. 15 of the 20 largest pharma companies are their clients, check. So what Telescope Innovations developed and is the global leader in must be understood. So this really will set the tone for us here, okay? In today's world, one drug requires up to 30,000 experiments to develop it and get it to market. A good and devoted chemist, the guys in the white lab coats, they're able to conduct roughly 5 experiments per week, compared with Telescope Innovations and their new physical AI self-driving lab that achieves a massive structural leap, executing a year's worth of traditional lab work in a single week through a continuous 24/7 autonomous workflow. And I know we think about self-driving like it's driving around the town. No, it just means it's parked there in a lab doing all of this work. That's a revolution and an absolute game changer. So on December 9th, 2025, Telescope Innovations delivered its proprietary product for the first time. So look at the screen. This is the team that's behind all of this. I'm convinced that this is a chance to partner with some pure geniuses here. So Telescope Innovations is rapidly advancing the development of a self-driving lab. This is a product that is launched onto the world stage for the first time ever. It's being developed and sold for the first time by Telescope Innovations. And as far as I'm aware, they have no meaningful competitors in the market at all to offer a complete SDL, self-driving lab, and related expert services. So the expertise needed in order to actually pull this off required a team that won Nobel Prizes, patented dozens of times, published hundreds of academic reports. So with the self-driving lab platform, what it does, it unifies chemistry, AI, and automation all in one to deliver 2 transformative advantages to the customer. So the core process is a sophisticated sort of closed loop cycle. So AI designs complex experiments for this lab to run. Then the robots execute high-stake workflows. Then sensors analyze the results in real time. Then machine learning optimizes the next iteration of those experiments and does it again. It runs 24/7 with minimal human intervention to accelerate discovery and drastically cut R&D costs. Again, as I said, one good chemist can usually do 5 experiments per week. This is a game changer. So here's the very simple explanation of the value add. When you truly grasp like the savings in money and time for customers of this breakthrough autonomous lab, your jaw is going to drop. The technology allows companies to finally reclaim the clock against a multi-billion-dollar bottleneck. And here's exactly how the breakdown works. And when I was looking through these numbers, it's actually pretty shocking. So today, a conventional lab, a company files a patent on, X date, okay? Then it typically faces a 10-year lead time to develop and then commercialize the product. Development costs can reach $900 million during this time period. That leaves only 10 years to monetize the invention under that patent law before the patent expires, and then other companies have a shot at it. So what Telescope Innovations does with their self-driving lab, if a customer utilizes this platform and then files a patent on X date, management projections indicate that the SDL platform's autonomous capabilities could shave years off the total time to market. Based on management estimates, the SDL can actually reduce development time by 30%. So the efficiency would add years of like high margin monetization under patent laws. So bottom line, Telescope Innovations is developing a platform that, according to internal numbers, potentially saves up to $600 million in costs per drug. That's unreal.
The revenue gain from the integration of AI systems is astronomical. This sounds like good news.
What to do about mass unemployment? This is going to be a massive social challenge. And I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. I don't think we're going to have a choice.
Universal basic income.
Universal basic income. I think it's going to be necessary.
So it means that unemployed people will be paid across the globe.
Yeah.
Because there is no job, machine, robot is taking over.
That's simply and I want to be clear that these are not things that I think that I wish would happen. These are simply things that I think probably will happen.
It is hopeful to think that the elite might consider providing welfare to those who lost their jobs due to AI integration. However, this is seldom the case with these elites who are rumored as not being that close to our Heavenly Father. The amount of cost savings and profits made from the integration of AI autonomous systems could serve as welfare for, yeah, right. Wait till you see what they did to significantly reduce the population of the Black American community as opposed to providing welfare. This situation puts us in the same position as Black Americans and explains Bill Gates' population reduction strategies as stipulated in episode 1. Now, we want to see what they did to significantly reduce the population of the Black American community as opposed to providing welfare. I know we took a detour into other topics. Nonetheless, our main agenda includes relating what happened to Black Americans to current events. Remember, what happened to this minority group in America would later be extrapolated to the wider society, particularly targeting the poor or low-income earners. Let's continue watching and pay attention to the trajectory of events leading up to the legalization of abortion.
And what the elite knew was that the end of slavery would instantly release 4 million people into the economy who had been kept uneducated and effectively unemployable anywhere but the cotton field. And what they were concerned about was that this was going to bankrupt the American economy. Taxes were going to go through the roof to take care of these people. Crime was going to be rampant. The prisons were going to be flooded. There was going to be this population overrun. And in the North, the biggest fear was migration from the South of these Black people. The other fear that these people had was intermarriage between blacks and whites would lead to a loss of racial purity. The question was, what were they going to do about it? And their initial thought was that they would just send all the slaves back to Africa. This plan was called colonization, and it had broad support among the wealthy elite. In fact, the American Colonization Society was even funded by the United States Congress. But in the end, colonization proved to be unworkable, and the idea was eventually scrapped. But about that same time, a new philosophy was emerging in the world. It was called eugenics, and for some, it seemed like the perfect solution to what had become known as the Negro dilemma.
My people, I want to show you that there is nothing new under the sun. Events keep on recurring into the future.
I do not join in the belief that the African is our equal in brain or in heart. And I believe that if we can, in any fair way, possess ourselves of his services, we have an equal right to utilize them to our advantage. Francis Galton, 1857.
Francis Galton pioneered eugenics. He coined the phrase to increase those he felt were superior and decrease those he felt were inferior. The funny part is that he came from a very wealthy family that made its wealth from the slave trade. What a lot of people don't know is that Francis Galton was a cousin to Charles Darwin. Francis Galton took Charles Darwin's philosophies and thoughts, and he actually put them into practice, and that is what we know today as eugenics. Eugenics and evolution are related in that they both see what they consider to be the highest primates, such as the gorilla, as almost indistinguishable from what they consider the lowest form of human, the African aborigine.
At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be wider, for it will intervene between man and a more civilized state. and some ape as low as a baboon instead of as now between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. Charles Darwin, 1890.
Charles Darwin is very well known for writing The Origin of Species in the 1800s. This book gave rise to evolutionary theory. What people don't know is that there was actually a longer original title to this book, and that was On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life.
The preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Take clear note of this statement for now. Let's continue.
Now, copies and editions that they made afterwards eliminated that phrase about the favored races. Evidently, they understood then that it was politically incorrect.
People may defend Francis Galton because he eventually rejected slavery, but they do point out that all of his wealth did derive from the slave trade. It needs to be known that he, as well as other eugenics, did not reject slavery till after it had ended, and they could not any longer exploit blacks legally. At this point, it would have been quite easy for Galton and his cohort to reject slavery. Indeed, we all have to realize that the eugenics movement was not invented by the everyday average white American, but by a select group of wealthy white elitists that have often used this ideology to pit all of white America against black America. And so we know this phenomenon is truly the case, even to this day, as it defines modern living.
Average Negroes possess too little intellect, self-reliance, and self-control to make it possible for them to sustain the burden of any respectable form of civilization without a large measure of external guidance and support. Francis Galton, 1873.
Eugenicists believed that Africans were inferior not just mentally, but physically, and that left to themselves, left alone, they would not make it. The problem is, it didn't work. With that failure, the eugenicists moved on to what is known as positive eugenics. In positive eugenics, the eugenicists wanted the white population to reproduce, to have so many children that it overwhelmed the black population. But that didn't work either. Next, they moved on to what they called negative eugenics. They knew that they could not round up all the blacks in the nation and execute them, so they decided to create an environment where they would convince the blacks to severely limit the number of children they were going to have, and thereby commit race suicide.
Did you hear that instead of rounding up all the blacks and shooting them, they had to convince them to severely reduce the number of children? In the modern world, population reduction is achievable through feminism, which is a movement that has made many women single and childless. Indeed, we fight against principalities and powers. And always remember this, the war is in the mind.
The problem of the socially fit must be treated not as one of color, but as a problem of the spread of feeble-mindedness. Dr. Charles Davenport, 1913, director of the Eugenics Record Office, Cold Spring Harbor, New York, and co-founder of the American Eugenics Society.
Eugenics realized that they could not promote their agenda because they knew it would be viewed as politically incorrect and socially unacceptable. And what they did was use code words that were once successful in slavery. Terms such as feeble-minded, unfit, words such as imbecile, immoral, criminal. They tagged those labels upon the targeted community. These words were less inflammatory, and they let society not be truly alarmed of the original intent. But I believe that everyone truly knew what segment of the people they were actually talking about.
Even a cursory glance at the charts, photographs, and diagrams used to popularize eugenic ideals reveals that the unfit were swarthy, black, and ugly by Anglo-Saxon standards, with flattened noses, wiry hair, and prognathous profiles. Harriet Washington, author, Medical Apartheid.
In the early 20th century, the white elitists who made up the eugenics movement were no longer just philosophers and academics. Now they were industrialists and billionaires who had come to embrace a worldview that was essentially identical to the eugenics movement. The same individuals and corporations who had once made millions on the backs of slaves were now willing to spend millions to get rid of them. But that didn't mean that these guys were interested in being public crusaders for the eugenics movement. They were certainly willing to be the brains and the money behind it, but they would hire crusaders to do the dirty work. And the primary one they settled upon was a woman named Margaret Sanger. She was the founder of the American Birth Control League and the publisher of its newsletter, the Birth Control Review. On a practical level, the relationship between Sanger and these elitists was basically a marriage of convenience. In order to advance their common agendas, they needed a front man and she needed money. And the whole thing would be held together by this kind of bizarre obsession with race and class. The result was that the American Birth Control League became the driving force behind the American eugenics movement. Eugenics would no longer just be a philosophy. Sanger and others like her were going to put it into practice.
We are paying for and even submitting to the dictates of an ever-increasing, unceasingly spawning class of human beings who never should have been born at all. Margaret Sanger, 1922.
The laws of nature require the obliteration of the unfit, and human life is valuable only when it is of use to the community or race. Madison Grant, 1916, co-founder, American Eugenics Society.
The black man has never been a competitor, but has always been subservient to the white race. And just so long as he remains subservient, his position is secure. And just so soon as he becomes a competitor, his fate is sealed. Dr. Benjamin Hayes, eugenicist, 1905.
The American Birth Control League was wise enough to get their program of population control across by using what had worked in the past. The same code words that had established the institution of slavery and that were also used by the early eugenics movement was once again used by the American Birth Control League. The Margaret Sangers of those days did not come and say that they were trying to eliminate black people. They had a different approach, a more subtle strategy. Well, she was successful simply because of her eugenics friends who for the past 50 years had put on those labels on minorities. And therefore, society was more or less desensitized. In effect, the code words hid the agenda of Margaret Sanger and the eugenics.
At about the same time, the American Birth Control League was changing its name to Planned Parenthood. A lot of books and reports began coming out that attempted to put a happy face on eugenics, and many of them were written by people that were associated with Planned Parenthood. The strategy here was obvious. Since the Nazis had turned eugenics into a four-letter word, the American eugenics movement decided it was time to lay low. So most of their writings during this time period downplayed the role of eugenics and couched their agenda in terms of helping the African American. Perhaps the best example of this is a 1,500-page book by eugenicist Gunnar Myrdal called An American Dilemma, The Negro Problem in Modern Democracy. Interestingly, this book was not the result of some mom-and-pop operation. Myrdal had 75 assistants working on this project whose salaries were being paid for by the Carnegie Corporation, and Carnegie had been a major player in the eugenics movement for many years.
Gunnar Myrdal and his wife Alva were both involved in eugenics. They were funded by both the Rockefeller Foundation and the Carnegie Corporation. They were also closely linked to a Swedish eugenics program which forcibly sterilized 66,000 people. When you read chapter 7 of this book, it becomes undeniable that this is a blueprint for the modern eugenics movement that we still see in the United States today. The bottom line is that Gunnar Myrdal believed that not only could blacks not help themselves, he felt that nobody could help them, and the only solution in his eyes was to get rid of them.
Commonly, it is considered a great misfortune for America that Negro slaves were ever imported. The presence of Negroes in America today is usually considered a plight of the nation. Chapter 7, page 167. All white Americans agree that if the Negro is to be eliminated, he must be eliminated slowly, so as not to hurt any living individual Negroes. Chapter 7, page 168. The only way possible of decreasing Negro population is by means of controlling fertility. Chapter 7, page 170. Birth control facilities could be extended relatively more to Negroes than to whites, since Negroes are more concentrated in the lower income and education classes. Chapter 7, page 176.
One thing I find very revealing about chapter 7 is the first paragraph. Murdahl uses U.S. Census Bureau figures to show that between 1790 and 1940, the black population in the United States increased 17 times. At the same time, those Census Bureau figures show that the white population increased 37 times. However, neither Murdahl nor any other eugenicist wrote anything about what to do about that part of the population that was increasing twice as fast as the black population.
The practice of birth control among the majority of colored people would probably be more eugenic than among their white compatriots. The dissemination of the information of birth control should have begun with this class, rather than with the upper social and economic classes of white citizens. Walter Turpening, Birth Control Review, 1932.
In virtually every community where Negroes dwell, one finds them in fat times and lean alike, contributing a disproportionate number to the roles of the dependents and delinquents. They make excessive demands on the white man's charity and overtax his patience. Newell Sims, Birth Control Review, 1932.
Fast forward to today. If you want to know why everything feels rigged, why marriages are collapsing, why women act like Instagram porn stars and still demand a ring, you have to stop treating this like some random modern glitch, because it's not. This entire system was built on purpose, brick by brick, over 100 years ago. And it wants you to direct your hatred at the young girls today who were raised to be like this, because it takes away attention from the institutions, the financiers, and the eugenic agenda that's really at hand. There is a reason why the white ethno-European Catholic women are the ones who are the least likely to reproduce in 2025. Most people think that the rot started with Tinder or OnlyFans. Wrong. It started the second they sold the women's liberation as a Trojan horse for sexual anarchy. The heroes they put on the posters, the suffragettes everyone worships today. A huge chunk of them, and especially the loud male allies riding their coattails, weren't fighting for voting rights. Victoria Woodhull, the first boss babe to run for president in 1872, openly preached free love, said marriage was slavery, and ran a newspaper with her sister, bragging about their sexual encounters and affairs.
George Bernard Shaw. As a famous playwright and open Fabian socialist, he openly called for state-run breeding farms and said marriage was legalized prostitution, and argued that women should be free to have children with whichever men they found most fit. How it only gets worse from here. H.G. Wells, the sci-fi writer and another Fabian socialist, was a serial adulterer who bragged about sleeping with hundreds of women, pushed free love as the future, wrote novels glorifying it, and said suffrage was only useful because it would destroy the family unit and make casual sex socially acceptable. Women's voting rights got hijacked on day one by sexual anarchists who wanted the leash off. Fast forward to the 20th century scientists. If you were hoping things get better, they don't. Bring Alfred Kinsey, claimed 10-year-olds could orgasm. You can find this in Table 34 of his own report. Said jealousy and monogamy were cultural deformities. He famously claimed that the only unnatural sexual act is the one that cannot be performed. He would have made for a great episode of EDP Watch. Yet this guy got medals, university buildings, and writings turned into required college reading. After Sexual Behavior in the Human Male dropped in 1948, it sold 200,000 copies in 2 months and blew up into a national event. One contemporary review even framed it as required reading for a broad list of professional gatekeepers: physicians, educators, psychologists, legislators, and judges, all of the most influential aspects of society. But its popularity wasn't an accident at all. This Space Cowboys book was propelled by the massive funding from Rockefeller Foundation, which provided the primary financial backing for his research through the National Research Council's Committee for Research in Problems of Sex. Grants started small, $1,600 in that time's money in 1941, but ramped up significantly, reaching $40,000 annually by 1947. That's not to count the dozens and dozens of other similar studies that the Rockefellers were funding at the time. At its peak, this made up a substantial portion of the committee's budget, enabling Kinsey to hire assistants, expand interviews, and publish the book. But at this time, a lot of this stuff still floated in ideas in academia, but someone had to popularize it. But the question was who? Or Hugh? For Hugh Hefner, Playboy wasn't a side hustle, it was a manifesto. It was a way to take all of these perverted ideas and begin to mold society into their agenda, one that hated the Catholic Church and the teachings of Christ and sought to blot it out from the earth. Hefner said in 1965 that the sexual revolution is the end of Puritanism and the beginning of pleasure as a way of life. Marriage as we know it will disappear. Hugh Hefner didn't just sell nude photos, he sold a lifestyle that made pornography feel sophisticated and normal. At its peak, Playboy wasn't a niche product, it had over 7 million readers in the 1970s, and it wasn't a broke rebel Zion either. A 1971 timepiece on Playboy going public reported that the corporation had $132 million in revenue the prior year, with $9.2 million net income, and that the magazine accounted for more than half of that revenue. That's the money trail. Normalize the product, scale it through mainstream distribution, and then pretend that it's just an accident and that it's just entertainment and that the people just like it. You end up having a movie called The Pawnbroker that changes the Hays Code and basically normalizes porn. And once it's normalized, it does two things at the same time. It feminizes and trains men to relate like consumers, which are always comparing and always shopping and always restless and always looking for their next fix. And it pressures women to compete in an attention market where the winning strategy is to increasingly perform sexuality and to increasingly dress less modestly and to increasingly become more and more of a hoe, even if they'd never call it that. A peer-reviewed longitudinal paper in the Journal of Sex Research examined pornography use in divorce over time. The American Sociological Association summarized the same core findings plainly. Beginning pornography use was associated with a higher probability of divorce. Married people who started watching porn were about twice as likely to divorce in subsequent years in that analysis. But Hefner wasn't alone in pushing this agenda. His Playboy empire built itself on the foundation laid by Margaret Sanger, the founder of what became Planned Parenthood. Sanger called marriage legalized prostitution and birth control the pivot of civilization, so women could sleep around without consequences. Sanger's writings and speeches openly pushed for quote-unquote free love and selective breeding, arguing that unchecked reproduction amongst the unfit, including the poor, disabled, and Catholics, threatened progress. She even spoke at KKK rallies in the 1920s to promote her eugenic agenda. Sanger's first U.S. birth control clinic opened in 1916 in Brooklyn's Brownsville neighborhood, a heavily Italian Catholic immigrant area. While she framed it as serving poor communities, critics note her eugenic views targeted groups with high fertility, primarily Catholics, who she saw as unfit or burdensome. Her Negro Project in 1939 aimed to reduce birth rates in black communities, conveniently also mostly Christian. But the biggest shift began after World War II. As white suburban birth rates fell after the 1960s pill, Planned Parenthood shifted focus to minorities and religious groups with higher fertility, including conservative Catholics and some Protestants.
But from my view, I believe that there should be no more babies.
Sources describe early clinics targeting inner-city areas with large Catholic populations, Eastern and Southern Europeans initially, and then later Hispanic Catholics and Italians. Even right now, 62% of Planned Parenthood abortion facilities are within 2 miles of black populations, 64% near Hispanic and Latino areas, many of which are Catholic-heavy. These weren't random weirdos. They were celebrated, funded, and platformed by all of the major American and foreign interest institutions for one goal: to destroy the Christian sexual order so that they can install the final form of human slavery, the technocracy and transhumanism. But at this time, women get, quote, liberated into working and sleeping around, men get pacified with porn and video games, birth rates crash, and the state becomes the only family left. But it doesn't just stop with women getting sold the lie of liberation. The same poison that rewired society hits men even harder, and the fallout is brutal. Look at the numbers.
When 17,000 aborted babies were found in a dumpster outside of a pathology laboratory in Los Angeles, California, some 12 to 15,000 were observed to be black. Irma Clardy Craven, Chairman, Minneapolis Commission on Human Rights and Secretary of the Urban League.
To understand what the agenda was behind the legalization of abortion, all you need to do is look at the statistics from the U.S. government. Studies from the CDC show that prior to the legalization of abortion, approximately 80% of all illegal abortions were done on white women. One study in New York even found that white women had 5 times as many abortions as black women. But at the moment abortion became legal, that began to reverse. And that's why the legalization of abortion was so crucial for the eugenics movement. Legalization created the ability to market abortion in the black community. And from a eugenics standpoint, that changed everything.
these people cannot have it both ways. First, they say that birth control will reduce the number of abortions. Then they flood our neighborhoods with birth control clinics. And what's the result? Our abortion rate skyrockets. So either they lied about the fact that birth control would reduce abortions in our neighborhoods, or this is the results and the purpose they wanted from the beginning. At this point, I truly have the tendency to believe the latter.
Since 1973, legal abortion has killed more African Americans than AIDS, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and violent crime combined. Every week, more blacks die in American abortion clinics than were killed in the entire Vietnam War. And the largest chain of abortion clinics in the United States is operated by Planned Parenthood.
We have now reached a point in this country that African American women, though they make up 12% of the population, they account for 37% of the abortions. An African American baby is almost 5 times more likely to be aborted than a white child. The abortion industry at this point kills as many African American people every 4 days as the Klan killed in 150 years. And you can truly say the most dangerous place for an African American to be is in the womb of their African American mother.
Birth control and abortion are turning out to be the great eugenic advances of our time. Frederick Osborne, founding member of the American Eugenics Society, 1973.
The best way to hate a nigger is to hate him before he is born. Leander Perez, Louisiana State Judge, 1970.
2 years after the director of Iowa Planned Parenthood had publicly attacked the state's eugenics board for not approving enough sterilizations, a bill was introduced in the Iowa legislature to legalize abortion. Despite having the support of both the state Republican Party and the state Democratic Party, as well as strong backing from the governor, the bill would be defeated almost single-handedly by the only African American in the Iowa legislature.
Proponents have argued this bill is for blacks and the poor who want abortions and can't afford one. This is the phoniest and most preposterous argument of all. I represent the inner city where the majority of blacks and poor live, and I challenge anyone here to show me a waiting line of either blacks or poor whites who are wanting an abortion. Iowa State Representative June Franklin, Democrat, 1971.
From the beginning, it was obvious that racism was the driving force behind the eugenics movement. While it was true that from time to time these elitists and social engineers would toss a few lower-class whites in among the feeble-minded and worthless who should be bred out of society, it was also true that they never seemed to include blacks among the best and the brightest who should be bred in. And at the same time, the country was being saturated with calls for population control and family planning. The facilities to carry them out were pouring into the black community. After all, no one was suggesting that there were too many white people in the world. And realities like those did not go unnoticed by early civil rights activists. For them, the reason birth control and abortion were being pushed was not a secret.
Those whom we could not get rid of in the rice paddies of Vietnam, we now propose to exterminate if necessary, eliminate if possible, in the OB wards and gynecology clinics of our urban hospitals. Jesse Jackson, 1971.
Black people are the target of birth control, not because the ruling politicians like them and care about their economic equality, but because they hate them and can no longer use them in plantations and other cheap labor conditions. Muhammad Speaks, the Black Muslim newspaper, 1970.
I believe the entire question of abortions is just one more in the continuous series of events to eliminate the black population. Father George Clemens, Jet Magazine.
1973.
The abortion law hides behind the guise of helping women, when in reality it will attempt to destroy our people. Brenda Hyson, New York chapter, Black Panther Party, July 1970.
The racist tells you to take birth control pills to kill, to murder life that might have existed if you had not. They are planning mass extermination of people they consider dispensable. Van Keys, Oakland chapter, Black Panther Party, 1969.
A true revolutionary cares about the people. He cares to the point that he is willing to put his life on the line to help the masses of poor and oppressed people. He would never think of killing his unborn child. Detroit chapter, Black Panther Party, 1970.
Who the hell is getting the pill? The Mexican and the Negro. Do you want to wipe us out? Cesar Chavez, 1967.
In 1973, the year abortion was legalized nationwide, Dr. Christopher Tizzi produced a study on abortion demographics at the request of the Population Council, a New York-based eugenics organization. In this report, Tizzi confirmed previous research showing that when abortion is illegal, the abortion rate is much higher for white women than for black women, but that this completely reverses whenever abortion is legalized. At the time he published these findings, Tizzi was a consultant to both Planned Parenthood and the National Abortion Federation.
Other researchers within the eugenics and abortion movements were also documenting that easy access to abortion clinics produces higher abortion rates in the surrounding area. And at least one expert discovered that having a nearby clinic is a bigger factor in the black abortion rate than it is in the white abortion rate. At the same time this data is being circulated, Planned Parenthood and the rest of the abortion lobby were in the process of locating the vast majority of their facilities in minority neighborhoods. Then in 1974, a study was released on population control that had been conducted by researchers at 3 major universities. By analyzing data obtained from Planned Parenthood's own records, they determined that the #1 factor in deciding whether a county in the United States provided free or low-cost family planning services was not poverty, but race. The researchers said their findings seemed to support the contention of many civil rights activists that such programs are less intended to assist the poor than they are to control the growth of the black population.
Culture is not your friend. Culture is for other people's convenience and the convenience of various institutions, churches, companies, tax collection schemes. It insults you, it disempowers you, it uses and abuses you. None of us are well treated by culture. And yet we glorify, the creative potential of the individual, the rights of the individual. We understand the felt presence of experience is what is most important, but the culture is a perversion. It fetishizes objects, creates consumer mania, it creates endless forms of false happiness, endless forms of false understanding in the form of squirrely religions and silly cults. It invites people to diminish themselves and dehumanize themselves, and yet you can stand back and look at this planet and see that we have the money, the power, the medical understanding, the scientific know-how, the love, and the community to produce a kind of human paradise. But we are led by the least among us, the least intelligent, the least noble, the least visionary, and we do not fight back against the dehumanizing values that are handed down as control icons.
All across America, you can stand outside of the abortion clinics and see a steady stream of black women coming in and out. But somewhere along the way, we got the idea that this is a white issue or a conservative issue or a Republican issue, and therefore, it's not an issue that we have to be concerned about. This same attitude has allowed Planned Parenthood and other members of the abortion industry to carry out this genocide right under our very noses. Right now, in America, about half of our babies are being killed in the womb. And in certain parts of America, More of our babies are being aborted than are being born.
To a worthless currency.
Western nations are not reproducing. They actually can't. And the reason that they can't is because once you have a rejection of some type of higher value which tells you to do a thing, in this case to breed and multiply, you're only stuck with the materialist worldview. And under the materialist worldview, why should you have a child at all? If you can do the procreative act absent the child, then why wouldn't you do that instead of burdening yourself with the result of it, which is a kid? And so once that choice becomes available, many people take it. It adds to societal decay. All of this leads to a lack of reproduction rates, and this is really bad.
J.D. Unwin wrote a book in 1934 called Sex and Culture, where he examined 86 civilizations over 5,000 years. And shocker, he finds a 100% correlation between free the libido, Woodstock sexual insanity, and the death of civilizations. And he says once a civilization adopts total sexual freedom, that's actually the phrase he uses, you have 3 generations before your civilization is taken over by another society with greater social energy. Child sacrifice is always the foundation of a teetering empire. You can't get the right to life right, you won't get any other rights right? And those who murder the unborn cannot be trusted to govern the born. And those who murder the unborn will one day murder you too, the longer that you tolerate the sacrament of Satan. I think it was 73. 3 things happened in 1973. Obviously Roe v. Wade, the Endangered Species Act that gives more legal protections to porpoises and sea turtles than human babies.
Wow.
And thirdly, the removing of obscenity laws by our Supreme Court, allowing the widespread distribution of pornography. All that happens in 73. So if I'm doing my math right, 73 to 2003, 2003 to 2033. So we're approaching the 3rd and final chapter.
Do it. And this humiliating exchange between Andrew Wilson and one of these Christian conservative covert feminists makes this crystal clear.
And as a woman, I want a strong man who is a protector and a provider that will go to war if need be, that will protect me, protect my family, make money. I see that as being actually masculine. That's like the man that I grew up with, my dad. But what we're seeing now is these young men who look at Andrew Tate and the Tate brothers. They're like, oh, great, that's a manly man. So at some point, I think we'll go back to maybe meeting in the middle here.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just...
Meeting in the middle here.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just more feminist nonsense, ultimately. And the covert feminism in society is big, especially on the conservative side. So here's what happens, right? Women need to have feminine virtues for men to be pursuing masculine virtues, for you to say things like, what I want is for men to protect me and I want men to make money. Well, that's great. What that ends up doing is it gives you a set of privilege in society. What do men get? What do men get for doing that for you? What are we getting from women for doing that? Are we getting chaste virgins on our wedding night? No, we're not getting chaste virgins on our wedding night. Are we getting women of great virtue? No, we're not getting women of great virtue. The idea of courtly love is supposed to be done for women of great virtue. Where are they? Well, they're nowhere. When female conservative influencers say this, it's actually a form of covert feminism. They're saying, I want privilege in society, but what is it women are giving to men to get it? What?
These so-called traditional conservative Christian women come out on television in a face full of makeup and demand traditional values from a man, while wanting to keep modern values for themselves whenever it feels convenient.
All you guys who are in a situation with a girl where you know you have absolutely no authority, no respect, the shit is straight damaged. You may not have the strength to pull away, but I'm telling you, the world is set up in this Western civilization where she gets to destroy you. And every excuse will be made for her. Yeah. So you know the situation you in right now. If you want to stay in it, be down. I can't tell you what to do, but I'm telling you from experience. If you know the bitch ain't shit, because you didn't have a father, did you? You didn't have no other side of the game talking to you. Please, just take into what I'm saying into consideration. If you know the bitch ain't shit, you better get the fuck away from her because your legacy on this planet is in danger.
Tell us the truth!